Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. We're here today with special guest, Lisa Loop, who's here to share with us her new novel, States of Matter. So what if everything you thought you remembered about your life, your love, or even your own mind wasn't the full truth? Well, today's guest is going to dive into just that. Lisa Loop has published in NBC.com Think, the Coachella Review, Kelp, University of Alabama Z Publications, Gunpowder Press, and many other places. She's the author of 5 books, 2 under the pen name Thora Wolf. A former Hollywood creative executive, originally from Seattle, she lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their elderly Aussie Shepherd mix. So welcome to the show, Lisa Loop.
Thank you so much for having me.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book, Lisa. I got to tell you, once I picked this book up, I did not want to put it down. What even inspired you to write States of Matter?
Well, I've always been interested in the way trauma affects memory. And as I'm sure many listeners know, people who have experienced trauma often have gaps in their memories. Sometimes they feel removed from who they were before trauma. So, one of my favorite places in the world is a particular beach, which is really just an access point where I used to swim most days in summer. And this beach happens to be within a row of tech mansions. So, if you swam there a couple of years ago, you could see a huge, beautiful modern masterpiece being built day by day. And I began to get fascinated about who was building this. And a character just came knocking. She loved the lake as much as I did. And in this character's mind, living there was like putting herself in the happiest possible place. But she also had trauma and she also had difficulties with memory. And I just became obsessed with her and wanted to know more about her.
So can you share a little bit about the story with us? I know you just gave us a little taste, but there's so much more without doing spoilers.
Right. So imagine waking up with no memory of the helicopter crash that killed your family. You're haunted by ghosts, you're hunted by a killer, only to discover you're a wealthy tech genius who built an android who speaks in the voices of the dead. So that's my premise. And Thea, my main character, starts life over in the middle of a lot of hoopla, but she is in some ways like a child, kind of oblivious. And as you get to know her, it becomes apparent that she might be choosing to stay that way. So she's like a brand new person in a situation she doesn't understand that looks placid on the surface, beautiful house, unlimited wealth, handsome mystery man caring for her. But as she begins to perceive more, she encounters layer after layer of secrecy. Her coma was caused by this terrible helicopter crash that killed her husband and daughter, which might or might not have been sabotage. And as you can imagine, she doesn't want to remember her loved ones at first. Even though she can't really trust her brain or perceptions, someone appears to be trying to kill her. So she has to come back to life. Her mind finds a workaround to her dilemma as a way to survive. And at first, the ghosts of people she has known, like a rock god she went to high school with, appear to guide her. But as she begins to reclaim her life, it gets clearer that these benevolent beings might not really have such great intentions. And it turns out that Thea was the brains behind the tech empire she built with her late husband. And the secret project she was working on was this android who can speak both in the voice of her dead husband, but also in the voice of the man she's in love with. So that forces her to have to grapple with the situation. I mean, what do you do with a product like that? Is it something worth developing? And if so, for what purpose? What are the implications? So she has all these reasons to come back to life, but there's a lot of pain in that.
Well, Thea Sun is such a fascinating protagonist. What drew you to create a character with such layered contradictions?
Well, I worked as a certified coactive life coach for 10 years. So I had the opportunity to take a deep dive with my clients. And one of the things you discover when you're in that privileged position with people is that everyone is a mass of contradictions under the surface. People all want to make it look good, but underneath, everyone is on their own journey. And those journeys are never easy. So there's a couple of other factors. One, I grew up and have spent half my life in Seattle, which, as everyone knows, became a tech hub with huge players. And for a while, it was a big center for rock and roll. And I was close enough to some of that to observe a few of the players. I saw everything I knew change very quickly. And obviously, a huge increase in wealth and power comes with some dark sides and some unexpected consequences. So that really interested me. And also, I suffer from complex post traumatic stress disorder. So, and a lot of my life it went undiagnosed. So, I have these whole swaths of time that I have almost no memories of. I had effectively walked through life as a different person. And from time to time, I would experience a consequence from my behavior in those times. I didn't remember being there, but I said and did things. And guess what? I'm still accountable for whatever those things were. So those situations are jarring. Luckily, I never did anything very noteworthy or dramatic. But for example, I might meet someone I knew in the past who remembers me, even whole conversations or situations that we were in together, and I have no memory of them at all. And it's really unnerving when that happens. Also, it's sort of unkind, to say the least. So, the idea of trauma in a setting of tech wealth and rock star power came along with the character, and of course, the setting of the Pacific Northwest.
Such a fascinating read. Well, this novel really plays with perception, what's real and what might not be real. So, how did you craft this dynamic in a way that still grounds the reader?
What a cool question. I am also a poet as well as writing novels and essays. And as a poet, you learn that the fastest way to bring your reader into the experience is with sensory details. So, one of Thea's gifts, left over from her brain being damaged in the helicopter crash, is that she still has physical reactions to the world. And this is something that happens to people, even with severe dementia. They retain memory of, for example, music, even when other things are unavailable. So Thea doesn't have normal memories, but situations sometimes elicit a strong reaction in her body. So for example, the first time she visits a place that she knows very well, she doesn't have immediate recall of every detail, but her physical body lets her know that the place is familiar. In that way, that sometimes you know that you've been someplace, but it takes longer to place when. And she uses that feeling of familiarity to begin to trust her instincts. Also, she has the empathy of someone who's been traumatized, which is a kind of superpower. She's gained the ability to feel out certain unspoken cues and details to guide her. So while her immediate perceptions are murky, meaning she doesn't know what's real, she has a deeper knowing and she can use those clues to build a new life.
So, Thea's identity as a tech genius is hidden beneath her grief. What does her return to that part of herself represent in this story?
One of the big secrets in Thea's life is that she was the brains behind some of the big initiatives that made the startup she co founded with her late husband successful. She has to grapple with the question of why people didn't know that they worked as a team. Her husband being the outward face with the hustle and the great people skills, and she, the nerd in the background, who never got the recognition she deserved. I think a lot of people can relate to the idea that when you're no longer in a relationship, in this case, because she's widowed, parts of you that have been put on the back burner while you were with that person return. So when Thea experiences public recognition, she's forced to stand in her identity as a creative force and a visionary, and she has to decide what to do with this power. Like, in a way, the book is really about the central question of what would you do if you could do almost anything? If your wealth and technical prowess were so all encompassing. Of course, I didn't know at the time I was writing this that we would all be thinking about tech billionaires and their intentions, but I was pondering the women who command tech fortunes and how they are reliably focused on doing good. So, this is a story of a woman who wakes up to enormous possibility and how she decides what's most important, experiencing her grief, allowing herself to feel the difficult emotions that her amnesia has kept at bay, are really key to regaining a full self that can return to the job at hand.
Thea's caregiver is both comforting and mysterious. Can you share more about their dynamic and the role that they play?
Absolutely. Lee, I got some criticism for the character of Lee because he appears to be one thing at the start of the book. And along the way, it's revealed that none of the assumptions people make about him are correct. I should say that I have known people like him, and to me, he is a very real person. But in the book, he starts out both as a mystery and a source of motivation. Thea has this enormous attraction to Lee, who is handsome and commanding, even as it's clear he feels his job of bringing her back to life is nearing completion. Eventually, they have to confront the reality of why Lee is there to begin with and where his loyalty comes from. At first, Thea is reluctant to wake up fully because she's afraid of losing him, and she doesn't know why. And when she does, when the truth comes back to both of them, it's devastating, but also liberating. Lee is the emotional heart of this book. In a way, it's his journey as much as it is Thea's. He is the person people consistently underestimate, and he's the healthiest character of all. His love is pure, and yet he's also the one who's able to simply grieve because he is not afraid to be vulnerable.
Without spoiling too much, there's a speedboat incident that occurs in the book. It's a major shift in the plot. What does this moment symbolize for Thea?
Right. The speedboat incident is kind of the inciting moment of the book when Thea is pushed to decide to return to the living. I mean, she has to because her tidy little world is no longer safe. Her little bubble has been burst. She can't trust her perceptions, and she doesn't really know what the moment means. But she does know that she's the only one who seems to think that it's important to find out. So she reverts to being her deeper self, the curious and driven version of Thea who came before. Also, perhaps not the kindest person. It is also the moment when she accepts help from one of her ghost guides, with all the consequences of trusting someone who she suspects might be a figment of her imagination. And this decision will come back to, I don't want to say haunt her, but it'll definitely come back to bite her.
Ooh, there's so much there. Oh my goodness. The title, States of Matter, seems to carry multiple meanings. How does this relate to the emotional, mental, or even physical themes within the novel?
Thank you for this question. I love it. So, states of matter refers to multiple themes. You're right. The most straightforward is physical, meaning water can be liquid, and water plays a big part in the book's action. And water can be solid, as in ice or snow, which were important in the helicopter crash. Emotionally, it suggests some of the ways the characters find resolution to their losses, because each of them, including the ones we haven't touched on in this conversation, is on a path to greater connection. Mentally, it doesn't directly relate to the notion that Thea has experienced a major injury that left her scarred and with a metal plate in her head, but maybe it suggests the idea of hope, that whatever mental state she finds herself in, there's a chance for recovery, even if that new iteration won't be the same as the one that came before. Matter is always evolving and shifting. And because Thea has access to some unseen parts of the world, both in her imagination and via technology, her understanding of what matter is composed of expands during her journey. She discovers that connection and love continue even when materially those relationships are not physically present.
I really appreciate how your novel explores grief in a very unconventional way. What made you choose this particular lens with which to examine loss?
Well, like most of us, by the time we reach adulthood, I have experienced grief and loss in my own life. And like Thea, I found solace in nature, in the forest, and swimming in the lake. So I probably have grief and the comfort of the natural world all wrapped up together in my mind. And like Thea, as someone with CPTSD, I know how disorienting it is to have gaps in my memory around times of great pain. I mean, that feeling that your brain is protecting you, not only from the sorrow of losing someone you love, but while keeping off the sad feelings, it is also, depriving you of the joy of a life of full vitality.
The book takes a slow return to memory and agency for Thea in the novel to a vast emotional drive. How did you balance the suspense with the emotional depth?
Oh my gosh, I hope I did that. But thank you. I really love the idea of vast emotional drive. So I was a theater kid growing up, and like the nerd I am, I was obsessed with Shakespeare. And as everyone knows, there's so much depth and drama in those works. It kind of gave me the idea that a good story goes to the heart of character. And also in my 20s, I worked as a story editor in a movie studio. And what I learned there was that people love to experience a character growing through adversity. So that when they claim a new state, as it were, when they emerge at the end of their journey, it feels earned. And that gives the reader or the audience hope for the future. I also had a writing teacher once who said that a novel is simply a question factory. And my job was to place unanswered questions in the mind of my readers so they could only answer those questions as the stories progress So it was my intention to put the reader in the head of a main character who, at the beginning, was mystified by everything, but takes it upon herself to fully understand the scope of life and the nature of the attacks upon her, which, of course, are consequences of what came before. It's all connected.
Well, you've written a protagonist who may be unreliable in her own understanding of reality, and you pull the reader right there. What were the challenges and the opportunities of working with that narrative?
Well, I love an unreliable narrator. There's something about a voice you can't fully trust that puts you in the situation. It's a puzzle to solve, especially when the character is lying to herself. This story is written in second person or close second. Um, and the reason for that is to bring the reader into the minds of those around Thea. They each have their own story because every human being is the main character of their own life and their own agenda. And each of them holds a clue to that puzzle.
Well, location plays a very important role in the story, especially the beach and the house. How did you use the setting to mirror like Thea's inner world?
Yeah, the beach and the house are integral to the story. The beach Thea built her house beside is a connection to her childhood self, to the kid growing up in adversity and her cohort of other kids who grew up to become famous musicians. This is where they hung out, where their personalities intersected, where they had a lot of early life experiences. It's where she learned to swim, which is a solace to her in hard times. And a big reason she felt that to build her house there was the greatest way to show herself that she had made it, that she had overcome being an underprivileged, fatherless kid who had nothing but her academic life and that beach going for her. It's not an accident that her first real conversations after awaking take place on that beach where she feels safe with people living and dead she knew from long before meeting her husband. A deep part of her remembers that beach. It's her happy place. But of course, the lake is where the speedboat incident takes place. It's shattering that innocent connection to the area. It's not a safe bubble. It's no more safe than any place else.
So, what do you hope readers will actually feel or think after finishing the novel?
The most important theme in this story is love. I hope people will find that by allowing their authentic side, the feelings they don't like of grief or loss or sorrow to show up and be present, it doesn't make them less acceptable. It makes them more connected to others. We as a society treat people in grief like they're removed from the fray. And sometimes we hurry to get them over their sadness and loss, when in fact, grief is a totally normal human emotion that everyone throughout history has or will experience. So, what I want people to consider is that by acknowledging how deeply you love someone, you honor them and you allow yourself to heal. It seems counterintuitive, but on the other side of the pain is the possibility for joy. And if you're lucky enough to have this gift of life, joy is worth striving for.
Are there elements of the story that were especially personal or difficult for you to write?
Yes and no. I took a lot of big swings with this book because apparently that's how my mind works. And I know some people will find it controversial. There was pressure to tone some things down and kind of neutralize certain themes. I did my best to earn everything. The hardest part of all creative work is just the vulnerability of putting myself out there. I've spent my whole life getting to the point where I could share my work with people and be seen. Now I've published 5 books and I have a book of poetry on the way, but every time it feels like a leap into the unknown without a parachute.
So, is States of Matter a standalone novel, or will you be revisiting Thea's world in the future?
I would love to. Um, in a way, Thea at the end of this novel is embarking on a whole new life. So rather than an ending, it's a beginning. It comes down to if she knocks on my door and insists on being written, like she did to me with this book.
Well, we can't wait to see what happens. Is there a website that our listeners can go to connect with you, Lisa?
Yeah, lisaloop.com, lisaloop.com, connects to everything.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new novel, States of Matter. Make sure to connect with Lisa on her website at lisaloop.com for more information on her work and to be part of her community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.